Cambridge Central Mosque, The Sacred Reimagined, is more than a book. It's an immersive look at one of the most iconic and award-winning buildings of our time. Written by Michael Glover, this beautifully designed book reveals the mosque's story through rich interviews with key community voices, stunning photography, and captivating details of its groundbreaking architecture. Celebrate a vision that redefines a British mosque for the 21st century. Proceeds from the book go towards helping our important work. Order your copy now.
There have been a number of generally very inspirational milestones that we have passed as we have been working on this project since 2008, when this plot of land was, through various complex manoeuvres that I still don't quite understand, we managed to get the land, and then the story began. So now we come to one of the sort of concluding capstones, which is that people are starting to write about the project, which is, I suppose, a vote of confidence. And Michael's book, which repays careful reading and rereading, I think, for me has amongst its virtues the fact that it is very much his own open-minded vision of the mosque. It's not ideological, it's not tiresomely, crowd-pleasingly insistent upon East meets West and interfaith dialogue and gender and Islam and clash of civilizations. It's much more humane and real, and that in a sense encapsulates what we want the mosque to be. The mosque is ultimately about the human beings who inhabit it, engage with it, pray in it, get married in it, have their final last rites said in it. It is about the humans, and I very much appreciate the fact that the mosque book does reflect that, which is our guiding philosophy. So red letter day, certainly. And as I kind of, in a slightly exhausted way, look back over the last 15 years and trace the steps by which this mosque came to be over that extended period of time, overcoming a number of stereotypical obstacles, including difficult customers in the planning department, to anxious local residents, to difficult people in the Muslim community who wanted this, or who wanted that, who wanted the other, to more large questions, which perhaps are what Michael does focus on and which are of particular significance. What is actually going on here? What does it mean to take this famously static religious tradition, the sunset prayer, which they just observed here, I reckon is exactly identical in every jot and tittle to every sunset prayer that has ever happened in Islam for 14 centuries. It's a time warp. And it's the same everywhere around the world, this immutability that Muslims insist on in the midst of the fluidity of the modern world, where all narratives are changing and being warped, reinforced, challenging each other, being globalized. It's, to use the traditional language, the prayer is the pearl in the oyster, but the oyster is the not inconsiderable challenge of the architect, the craftsman, and the engineers who have to do that most difficult thing of providing a place where the pearl can grow and be itself. Sacred architecture is not an easy thing to envisage or to reimagine. To place a mosque, a symbol of this pearl-like immobility, in the heart of Cambridge, one of the 4 or 5 great intellectual hubs of modernity, the city of Newton, Darwin, Stephen Hawking, and a number of people who've caused various neuralgic issues for religion. To put a mosque here is no ordinary mosque project, and it became clear to us and was very, very clear to David from the outset that what we were doing was, as it were, if it worked, a signpost to a better future. Not a pastiche, a little bit of Mamluk this, a little bit of Victorian that, and stirred vigorously to produce something that might have been a disaster, but might have been mildly agreeable. What David did was to take several steps back and to reimagine the sacred, to try and conceive of what it could be to preserve this immutable pearl in the hurly-burly of a rapidly changing liquid modernity in a way that preserves the mosque-ness. That word works better in Arabic than in English, but you know what I mean. You walk into a mosque, the Blue Mosque in Istanbul or wherever, and you inhale mosque-ness and that intangible but recognizable thing. To use recognizably modern materials and very up-to-date technologies, and a statement about human joy and optimism. It's not a glum building at all. There is a restrained, festive quality to it that many people note the moment that they step in the building's door. To take that best aspect of the capacity of religion to inspire joy and hope and faith and optimism, and to put it into the city of Cambridge, it's not like any other mosque project anywhere. So in terms of the architectonic seriousness of the book, of the project, it's a very serious structure. But at the same time, it makes a very important cultural statement. I was looking at the index of the University Library this morning to see how many books have been written about mosques in Western Europe. A single monograph about a single book. There's only one other mosque in Europe that has had a book written about it, which is the great Umayyad Mosque in Cordoba, which is one of the wonders of the world, one of Spain's top tourist attractions, and is a miracle. And the other one, Michael's book about the Cambridge Central Mosque, both of those representing reimaginings of the sacred. The Muslims in this new green land of Spain doing something that uses the Visigothic horseshoe arches and something quite unlike Middle Eastern architecture, but that nonetheless is a miracle. Reimagining the sacred. Another thing I was struck by in my recent reading, in the very distant past, I knew an art historian called Sir Shaverall Sitwell, who was famous as a religiously rather troubled, he was an agnostic person, I think, historian of mainly sacred art, great books on cathedrals, a great book on monasteries, a reviver of our interest in the Baroque, and he has one book on Islamic buildings. And he wrote it in his kind of aristocratic, languid way back in the 1950s. In those days, you could have an agreeable breakfast in your hotel in Beirut and then motor down through Syria, and in the afternoon you'd be confronted by the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem. So I was interested to see, what does this lover of the European tradition have to say when he sees the Dome of the Rock? And he encapsulates it very, very brilliantly. He says that the Dome of the Rock is the sposalizio, or nuptials, of East and West. It is the most holy and beautiful building I have ever seen. And you think no amount of academic monographing could really encapsulate it so well. The nuptials of the East and the West. The early Muslims, that building was constructed when some of the Prophet's companions were still alive. This is the first building of the new civilization, and it's astonishing. Reminds one of the spiritual creative energies which are unleashed by the birth of a major new religion. The Dome of the Rock, in its perfection, is the sacred reimagined. It's not a church, not a Zoroastrian fire temple, it's something recognizably new. It has that mosque-ness about it. And unfortunately, he didn't go on to say, how is that possible that these chaps from the desert turn up and they produce something so dazzling when they come from the desert and they have no architecture? How is that possible? Reimagining the sacred, that is how major statements are made. And I like to think also of that phrase, the nuptials of East and West, forming part of the message of the Cambridge Mosque. That it's an English mosque, that was something that we underlined when we created the rather complex design brief, the distant days of the competition. We wanted an English mosque without explaining what on earth such a thing could possibly be. And as you know, and as Michael deftly narrates in his book, and the amazing photographs also, I think, draw attention to this, yeah, English, but not in some kind of stereotypical chocolate box way, but it's the soaring greatness of the English Gothic. But as the tree's branches come together, you can see the arabesque patterns which the late Keith Critchlow knew was really the heart of the sacred symbolism, and the language of the mosque, East meets West, the marriage, the nuptials of East and West. So not a kind of zero-sum game across a clash of civilizations. Let's have a bit more Islamic stuff and a bit less English stuff, but it's a very English building. It's a very Islamic building to show how the two narratives, which today we are told are at daggers drawn, the clash of civilizations, all of these European anxieties about Muslim immigration, it's on the front pages every day. A building, at its best, has the capacity to take us beyond that, to say, well, it's not just about making concessions or introducing little pastiche fragments and kitschy bits from different narratives to keep minorities happy. When great civilizations come together, greatness ensues. We should be welcoming this aspect of globalization as an opportunity to reimagine everything, not just the sacred. But if it can be done in a sacred space, it seems to me it can be done just about anywhere else in the world which architects inhabit, but also, I think, amongst our human selves. The book, one of its merits again is that it talks quite a bit about the sociality of the mosque, the kind of people who come, pictures of the Cambridge Sketchers Association coming to do pictures of the mosque. NHS used it for pop-up COVID vaccine centres during the pandemic. So not just the architecture says East meets West, a really good thing, a nuptials, fertile, but also the human realities and the dynamics, and even an event like this where we're all celebrating the same thing and making new friends and realizing that we're all human beings contemplating the same existential issues from slightly different viewpoints. It's that slightly different viewpoints that makes life worth living. So there is a rhetoric and an important message in this building. It's not just a place to keep minority community out of the rain. It's something that is an important signpost to the ongoing dynamism of religion, its capacity to recreate itself, its capacity to inspire people, whether or not they have any religious interests of their own. I think it's a profoundly hopeful building. And I think one of the reviewers, when it first came out, I can't remember where it was, perhaps The Guardian, said it's the architecture of hope. And I thought that was right. Like the Dome of the Rock, like the other great expressions of the human universal love for beauty that transcend our backgrounds, but we're just uplifted and made serene by the spectacle of the beauty surrounding us rather than confronting us, as it is with, say, a painting. When we enter beauty, we are reconfigured, we become humble. As one historian of Islamic art says, to enter a mosque is to put on a robe of honor. That robe of honor is for everybody, not just people who are there to pray the sunset prayer. So it has been, personally for me, a very encouraging journey, and I'm really so happy that we have this book and that Lund Humphreys were very generous in illustrating it in this sumptuous way. It's a really very beautifully sculpted, lovingly crafted production. I can't really fault it, from the binding to the colour separation to the way the text is placed on the pages. It's a exhausting business designing a good book. So a well-designed book, a well-written book, as a kind of capstone for this project, which I think pushes this relationship between East and West in a much more hopeful and interesting and also consoling direction. I know many of you here have worked very hard on this project and can feel justly proud as they walk around and see that at least some of the suggestions have been accommodated. But places of worship go on for a long time. Maybe it'll be here in another 1,000 years, who knows. When our names are dust at the building, we'll speak of a certain moment when human beings dared to hope, despite the headlines and despite anxieties of all kinds, dared to hope that bringing together two different narratives in a way that's authentically Islamic but that the world can recognise and feel at home in, is no little cultural achievement. It's primarily David's achievement. A shame he obviously couldn't be with us this evening. But remember the inscription in St. Paul's Cathedral. You look for Christopher Wren's grave, and you see the inscription, Si monumentum requiris circumspice. If you're looking for my memorial, just look around. So it's a celebration of his achievement, I think, this evening. Thank you all very much. Sorry for going on too long, but as you can see, I do get reassured, cheered up in this miserable time of the year, and with the inclement political climate all around us, to see that something like this can be made possible. And this is a very worthy record of the effort that everybody's put into making this building a reality. Thank you so much.